Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us some really compelling material focusing on 10th grade, ages 15 to 16. And honestly, it's way more than just another school year.
Oh, absolutely.
Our sources paint this as a truly pivotal period,
Yeah.
a time when so much internal growth and identity formation is really taking shape, beneath the surface.
Right. It's less about the big external shifts, maybe of ninth grade, like the new school,
Exactly.
and more about this really nuanced internal evolution. It's subtle but profound.
So we're going to unpack why this year can be such a significant turning point. We'll explore these developmental shifts, how their thinking changes, the complexities of their emotional worlds, how their sense of right and wrong deepens.
hmm
We'll also look at how they start to kind of solidify their self-concept, deal with the academic side of 10th grade, the social scene.
Which is always changing.
Always.
Yeah.
And we'll touch on some general gender trends and, importantly, some practical strategies for parents and caregivers. Because it seems like alongside growing confidence, there's often this parallel rise in self-pressure.
That's a key paradox. They might seem more capable, more sorted out, but internally, yeah, the pressure cooker can be on.
Okay, let's dive right into that developmental progression then. Cognitively, how are 15 and 16-year-olds really thinking differently compared to, say, the year before?
Well, cognitively, their sort of analytical toolkit gets a serious upgrade. They become much sharper at weighing different sides of an argument,
Okay.
spotting inconsistencies, those, hang on, that doesn't quite add up. Moments happen more often,
Okay.
and they reflect more deeply on outcomes, not just the immediate thing.
So maybe a bit less impulsive decision-making, hopefully.
The capacity for it is definitely growing, yeah. And this is when future thinking really kicks in more strongly. College, careers, their role in the world,
Yeah.
it all becomes less fuzzy, more concrete.
Yeah.
But maybe the most significant leap, it's their growing comfort with nuance. You start moving beyond seeing everything as just black or white.
Ah, the shades of gray.
Exactly. They begin to appreciate that things are often complex, that there isn't always one simple right answer. That's a huge cognitive step.
Yeah, that feels fundamental. What about their emotional lives then? What's that internal landscape like?
Emotionally, it's, like we said, this fascinating paradox. They might gain real confidence in one area, maybe sports or art or a particular subject,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, the pressure they put on themselves to keep succeeding or to live up to some ideal that can really ramp up.
And they start internalizing roles too, right?
Very much so. You see them taking on these labels, sometimes helpful, sometimes not. I'm the helper, I'm the funny one, I'm the slacker, the overachiever. These start to feel more like part of who they are.
Wow, those self-perceptions can really stick.
They really can. And while peers are still hugely important, for validation, they also develop a bit more capacity to step back, to evaluate those influences.
Mm.
And this is also crunch time for solidifying core personal values. Ideas about fairness, justice, what it means to be authentic, to be real, these become really central. What aligns with their inner compass starts to matter, like a lot.
And that ties right into the moral sophistication you mentioned. It sounds like they're not just accepting rules anymore.
Nope, definitely not. Just taking them at face value. They move beyond just follow the rule to questioning the why behind it.
Like, is this actually fair?
Exactly. Whose perspective does this rule serve? They start thinking about intentions versus just outcomes. And this idea of living authentically, being true to yourself, that becomes a really big driver.
So when they push back against things or get passionate about a cause, it's not necessarily just being difficult.
That's such a crucial insight from the material. It's often not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's more like they're actively building their own ethical framework.
Right.
They're testing out values, figuring out their stance. Engaging with politics or activism isn't just noise. It's them trying to build that internal compass.
That's a much more constructive way to see it. So how can adults support this moral compass building?
Well, the sources suggest really leaning into conversations about ethical dilemmas. Pose those what-if scenarios.
Like, what if your friend asked to copy your homework?
Precisely. And then listen, really listen to their reasoning, even if you think their first take is way off.
Yeah.
It's about understanding their thought process.
And letting them disagree.
Absolutely. Creating a space where it's okay to have different views,
Mhm.
respectfully, is key. Valuing their thinking doesn't mean you have to agree with their conclusion.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned 10th grade is key for solidifying their sense of self. Can you expand on that a bit? How does that happen?
Sure. So that earlier phase of trying on different identities, different looks, different interests, it starts to kind of settle, they begin weaving some of those threads into their core self-concept.
Right.
And this is where those self-labels we talked about, I'm just not a math person or I'm the emotional one, can really cement themselves.
And even casual comments can reinforce those.
Oh, definitely. Offhand remarks from teachers, parents, even friends can inadvertently strengthen these labels, sometimes limiting how they see their own potential down the road.
That's quite sobering. So how do we help them avoid getting stuck in those boxes, especially the negative ones?
The feedback we give becomes really critical. It needs to shift away from focusing on fixed talent, like you're so smart, towards their effort, the strategies they used, how they adapted when something was hard.
To focus on the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. And actively help them challenge and unlearn those limiting labels. If they say, I'm terrible at presentations, you can counter with, I notice you researched thoroughly. Maybe we can brainstorm some ways to feel more comfortable speaking. The core message needs to be, your story isn't finished. You're still writing it.
Our sources also brought up some general trends between boys and girls at this age. What patterns tend to emerge? Remembering these are just generalizations, of course.
Absolutely crucial to state that upfront individual experiences vary wildly. But generally speaking, academically, you might see girls grappling more with performance anxiety, maybe perfectionism, whereas boys might appear more relaxed, but sometimes risk disengaging if they don't feel connected or challenged.
Okay.
Emotionally, again, generalizing, girls might be more likely to talk about stress, but also might internalize difficult feelings. Boys might be more conditioned to mask vulnerability, maybe with humor or acting like they don't care.
And socially, or in early relationships.
Socially, girls' friendships might become quite intricate, with high expectations for communication and loyalty. Boys might forge deep bonds too, but perhaps struggle more to articulate vulnerability within those friendships.
Right.
And in early romance, girls might really crave that emotional connection and respect, while boys perhaps might be more focused initially on intimacy, but sometimes lack the emotional language to navigate the relationship's deeper aspects.
So different communication styles, different immediate priorities maybe.
Seems to be the trend, yeah. But I can't stress this enough. The sources rightly emphasize focusing on the individual kid, their specific needs, their unique pace, rather than leaning on these stereotypes.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears to the academic side of 10th grade. What's typically emphasized in their classes?
Well, in English, you often see a move towards deeper thematic analysis, comparing texts, learning about rhetoric, persuasion, and definitely stronger research skills.
Right.
Math usually gets more cumulative geometry, algebra the second are common, laying foundations for pre-calc. Things really start building on each other.
No skipping steps there.
Not easily. Science often means chemistry or physics, maybe advanced bio with more technical labs. History might dive into government, revolutions, world cultures, and electives start to feel more significant, maybe specializing or prepping for AP or honors tracks later.
It definitely sounds like the academic pressure ramps up.
It generally does. And a key point from our sources is that this is often when kids become really aware of different academic tracks.
Yeah.
That college prep versus other paths distinction becomes clearer, which can bring its own set of pressures and influence how they see themselves as students.
Which ties right into academic identity and the risk of burnout. What kinds of labels emerge there and what are the dangers?
Yeah, you start hearing things like, oh, she's an AP kid, or he's creative but not really book smart, or even, sadly, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. For the high achievers, the risks are real. Overcommitment, tying all their self-worth to grades, this intense fear of messing up.
Right.
But for students feeling less engaged, the risk is sliding into real disengagement, maybe using apathy, I don't care, to hide feeling inadequate, or avoiding help because of pride.
Both ends of the spectrum seem risky. What can we do to support them through this?
Normalizing struggle is huge. Sharing stories, even our own, about times learning was hard but we pushed through, making sure there's space in their life that's not about performance hobbies, downtime, just hanging out.
Protecting that non-academic time.
Definitely. And as adults, modeling that ourselves. Showing them we have boundaries with work, that we value rest and connection, not just achievement. They see more than we think.
Okay, let's talk about risk-taking. The material suggests this often increases in 10th grade. What does that look like?
Well, as they gain confidence and autonomy, they often test boundaries more. Socially, that might mean navigating parties, dating scene dynamics.
Yeah.
Activity-wise, maybe trying out for a tougher team, taking that challenging AP class, looking for an internship. And then there's testing independence, pushing curfew, wanting more freedom, maybe experimenting with things they know are off limits.
Is this just defiance then? Or something else?
The sources offer a really helpful frame. Think of it less as rebellion and more as boundary calibration. They're figuring out the edges of their world.
Okay, boundary calibration. I like that.
Yeah. Even kids who are usually rule followers might make risky choices sometimes out of curiosity, peer pressure, maybe even stress. Underneath it, often, is a question. Where are the limits, and will you still support me if I cross them?
That really changes how you might respond. So what's the recommended approach for parents?
Collaboration is key. Instead of just laying down the law, try co-creating agreements about things like curfews or expectations, discussing the why and the consequences together.
Giving them some ownership.
Exactly. Offering safe outs can be invaluable, like that pre-agreed pizza text or code word they can use to get picked up from a bad situation. No questions asked right then.
Oh, that's smart.
And when mistakes inevitably happen, the focus should be on rebuilding trust through conversation, understanding what happened, rather than just jumping to punishment.
Okay, let's draw a clearer line between ninth and 10th grade. How does the experience typically change?
Ninth grade is often really defined by those big transitions, new building, new social structure, first real taste of high school expectations. It's a lot of trial and error, kind of figuring it all out.
Right, survival mode sometimes.
Yeah, it can be. 10th grade tends to feel a bit more settled in terms of routines, but the stakes feel higher academically, socially. They might start questioning the groups they fell into in ninth grade, and you see a stronger push for privacy, for more control over their choices, wanting to be treated with more respect like a young adult. The feeling shifts from "I'm figuring it out" towards "I'm deciding who I actually am."
And that probably shows up in how they talk to us.
Oh, for sure. You might hear, "I got this" more often, that push for autonomy. Or, conversely, "I don't want to talk about it right now."
Which can be hard to hear.
It can. But the advice is usually to respect that need for space while gently reinforcing that you are there when they're ready. Don't push, but don't disappear either.
Now, one area needing ongoing support, according to the sources, is their emotional vocabulary. They might sound articulate, but there's a gap.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Might use big feeling words, but struggle to pinpoint the root emotion. Is it anger, or is it really disappointment masking hurt?
Okay.
They might confuse stress symptoms with sadness, or lack the tools to actually repair things when feelings get hurt in a friendship, for example.
So how can we help bridge that gap? Build that deeper emotional literacy?
Just initiating check-ins using specific feeling words can help. Not just, "How are you?" but, "Were you feeling mostly frustrated today, or was it more disappointment?"
Giving them options.
Exactly. And gently naming emotions you observe non-judgmentally.
Yeah.
You seem pretty quiet, feeling tired, or maybe a bit down. It opens the door. And again, modeling it ourselves, talking about our own feelings and how we manage them, how we apologize or fix things when we mess up emotionally. That's huge.
Friendships also seem to evolve quite a bit in 10th grade. More intense,
Right.
more complicated.
Both, often. They can be absolute lifelines, huge sources of support and identity anchors. But yeah, they can also become more exclusive. Cliques might solidify. Drama can ramp up. Sometimes manipulation or performative aspects come into play.
Performative? Like how?
Like maybe needing to act a certain way or express certain opinions to stay in with a group. Loyalty tests can become a thing. And as their own values shift, some friendships might naturally drift apart or end, which can be really painful.
Yeah, that sounds like genuine grief for them.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Validating that pain is important, not minimizing it like, "Oh, you'll make new friends." Teaching them about healthy distance can also be useful. Understanding you can care about someone without being tangled up in every single drama.
Okay, let's pivot to some specific parenting strategies highlighted in our materials. The first one is shifting from constant reminders to making agreements. How does that work?
It's really about fostering responsibility. So instead of, "Did you do your homework?" "Did you? Did you?"
Chuckle slightly. We've all been there.
Right. It's more like, "Okay, big project coming up. What's your plan for tackling it? How can we set up reminders together?" Or for free time, instead of dictating, discuss expectations. What do you need for downtime? What do I expect regarding chores? And find a mutual understanding. It builds ownership.
The next strategy, coach values, not just tasks. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, this is about connecting their actions to deeper principles. So less, "Did you finish your essay?" and more, "What does putting forth your best effort look like on this assignment?"
Linking it to effort or integrity?
Exactly. Or instead of just, Did you take out the trash? Maybe, how did contributing to the household feel this week? It elevates the conversation beyond just the checklist.
I like that. And the third one, give them the first draft. Tell me more.
This is about resisting the urge to jump in immediately with solutions or corrections. Let them take the first crack at planning something or solving a problem.
Even if you think you know better.
Especially then. Let them outline their plan for that science fair project or think through how they want to approach that awkward conversation with a friend. Hear their ideas first. Praise their thinking, their initiative, before offering suggestions. It builds their confidence and problem-solving muscles.
Great concept. The sources had some other practical tips, too, for specific moments. Any standouts?
Yeah, a few good ones, like if your teen shuts down, sometimes pushing for talk makes it worse. Offering a quiet, connecting activity instead of walk, music, just being nearby, can sometimes reopen the door later.
Sensory connection, maybe?
Could be. Another. When they confess a mistake, make your first response thanking them for their honesty. Deal with consequences after, but acknowledge the courage it took to tell you.
Build that trust.
Right. If they want to quit an activity, get curious before reacting. Is it boredom? Overwhelm? Social issues? Explore the why. And if they ask for more freedom, respond with curiosity about their plan. Okay, tell me what that looks like. How will you handle the responsibility that comes with it?
That curiosity piece keeps coming up. It seems vital. What about common stress points? What usually gets to 10th graders, and how can we help?
Oh, the list is familiar. The sheer volume of coursework, anxiety about the future college, jobs, life, friendship drama, definitely.
Yeah.
First, real heartbreaks can hit hard. And that constant pressure to perform, to measure up.
Yeah, so approaches.
For workload stress.
Yeah.
Help them break big things into tiny steps. Micro tasks. Focus on good enough sometimes, not constant perfection. Future anxiety. Normalize the uncertainty. Focus on building flexible skills, not rigid 5-year plans. Friend drama, heartbreak. Mostly just listen. Validate feelings. Be present without trying to fix it. And for performance pressure, keep reminding them their worth isn't based on their grades or achievements. Ever.
That inherent worth message. So important. Okay, turning to red flags. What should parents or caregivers be watching out for?
Sudden major shifts are usually worth paying attention to, like a big drop in grades or total withdrawal from school stuff.
Oh.
A marked increase in irritability, snapping, unusual secrecy. An obsessive focus on one thing, a game, diet, exercise, blocking out everything else. Drastic changes in friends or appearance, especially if it seems out of character, and that persistent I don't care attitude.
Right.
If it's new and pervasive.
And these could mean different things.
Right. Could be burnout, deep identity confusion, maybe depression or anxiety kicking in. Could be they're just overwhelmed by stress, feeling ashamed about something. That I don't care can often mask that they care very deeply but feel hopeless or vulnerable. It's a signal to look closer.
Got it. The digital world also evolves for them in 10th grade, doesn't it? It's more than just screen time.
Oh, much more. It becomes increasingly about crafting that online persona, that curated identity. The comparisons get maybe subtler than in middle school, but can feel more intense, more internalized. And unfortunately, there's also more potential exposure to more extreme content or unhealthy online groups if they're feeling isolated or looking for answers offline.
So how do we guide them through this digital landscape?
Keep the conversations about media literacy going. Not lectures, but discussions. What do you think the motive is behind this post? Who benefits from this message?
Critical thinking online.
Yes, and show genuine interest. Ask them to teach you about the platforms they use, the trends they see. It shows respect. By this age, managing their online rep is a real thing, dealing with DMs, drama, maybe even feeling whiplash between their online persona and who they are offline.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be.
Okay.
So ask open, non-judgy questions about how they navigate it. What's the vibe you try to put out online? And keep grounding them in their offline reality, their real-world strengths and relationships.
Finally, the sources offered some really valuable reflection prompts for caregivers. What should we be asking ourselves?
These are good ones. Like,
Ah.
am I really allowing space for my teen to surprise me, to be someone different than I expected? Or am I constantly narrating who I think they are or should be?
Oof, that's a tough one.
It is. Also, how am I offering support that empowers them rather than controls them? Have I created a space where they feel genuinely safe to opt in emotionally, to share messy feelings without fear of judgment or me rushing to fix it?
Right.
And, maybe the deepest, what fears or unresolved stuff from my own adolescence might I be projecting onto their experience right now?
Wow. Those really hit home. Any others?
Yeah, a few more related ones. Am I actually living The values I say are important. Am I showing up for the person they're becoming now, not just the kid they were?
Yeah.
How do I handle my own failures and setbacks? What am I modeling? And am I finding that tricky balance between providing structure and genuinely letting go, allowing them space to try, maybe fail, and learn?
This has been incredibly rich, such an important deep dive into 10th grade. If you had to distill it down, what's the key takeaway?
I think the core idea is that 10th grade is this year of consolidation, but with rising stakes. They are actively building their foundation, figuring out who they are in a more lasting way. They're the builders,
We're
really.
playing an our role.
We're shifting towards being the supportive scaffolding. Still essential, still nearby, providing structure and safety, but allowing them to do the building work themselves.
That's a great image. And a final thought to leave us with.
I think it's this. In 10th grade, they aren't just learning facts and figures. They are deeply engaged in deciding who they want to be when no one else is looking. They're
Oh.
cultivating that quiet integrity, their own vision, finding their voice, defining themselves from the inside out. Our role might feel less hands-on, less visible sometimes, but that steady, supportive presence, that message of, you're allowed to change and grow, I'm still here. That's profoundly important.
You're allowed to evolve. I'm still here.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for guiding us through this complex and crucial year. We really hope this gives our listeners food for thought, maybe reflecting on their own experiences or the teens in their lives. Definitely worth exploring more resources on adolescent development, too.